Hey, people. There we go. Greetings. Like my haircut? My wife cut my hair last night. And she used the razor as she had on that we have with the dog. So the dog and I shared razors. I don't know. I always feel very close to the dog. So here we have a dog and a cat, and some more cats and birds. They don't always mix well. My wife hasn't shaved my beard yet, so got a while to go. With a mustache, I may trim my mustache myself. Maybe I'll get adventurous and trim the beard myself. I don't know. Over there, you can see my dog, who is in his proper dad's talking time to go to sleep. Boring. Economics is boring. Did I mention my kids say economics is boring? Neither of them took economics in college. Older daughter, younger daughter saw no need to explain herself. So economics is boring, end of story. Older daughter, who majored in sociology, explained that she did not want to get into arguments with her professor or with me. And she didn't want to be the intermediary because she knew that if whatever she took, I was going to disagree with the guy, with the professor. Okay. Supply curves and marginal revenue. Class 4. That's not class 4. Okay. I'll fix that later. Okay. Today's stuff. Readings. Okay. Here's the neoclassical supply curve. If you took economics in high school, or if you were taking economics in most other places, including microeconomics in the institutions where I went to school, then you would have been given this. Neoclassical supply curves, upward sloping. Perfectly competitive firms would set the level of output according to the price. Give me a price, I'll give you the number of donuts that I'll produce. And where does this supply curve come from? The marginal cost curve. Why is it upward sloping? Because marginal cost curves are upward sloping. Why are marginal cost curves upward sloping? You could say, I could hold out my microphone like, like a performer at a rock concert, and hold out, and you would all say, marginal productivity is downward sloping, so the marginal cost curve is upward sloping. Yes. Okay. Now, perfectly competitive firms will face a demand curve. In the textbooks, they'll say the demand curve's flat. You could always sell more and more at the same price. We know that's not true. That's not true. That's true of virtually no real world firms. The Dunkin' Donuts on Route 9 in Amherst can sell more donuts, but ultimately they can sell more donuts only if they do something to attract more customers, like lower prices, put on a sale. Perfectly competitive firms face downward sloping demand curves. Now, in this neoclassical perfectly competitive world, the perfectly competitive firms will choose how much to produce at what price by the point where that downward sloping demand curve intersects their upward sloping marginal cost curve. So they'll produce where marginal utility equals marginal cost, which is pretty good, from the neoclassical perspective. That's almost as good as standard perfect competition. But in the real world, or the RW, as economists used to call it, in the RW, firms that act that way are generally going to go out of business because they're ignoring their fixed costs. So pricing at marginal cost means they're not taking account of those fixed costs. So they will generally be losing money. Only monopolists can survive. Okay, orthodox bottom line. Supply curve slope up, firms produce when marginal utility equals marginal cost. Punchline, ain't necessarily so. The firms that actually survive do not act like this. There you have your downward sloping demand curve, the perfectly competitive equilibrium where marginal utility equals marginal cost, and a price. Why do marginal costs rise? Because of diminishing marginal productivity. Variable inputs have less and less with which to work. Marginal productivity of labor declines with additional workers. All of the above. Okay. Perfectly competitive firms produce what P equals marginal cost, produce at a point on the rising marginal cost curve. They're myopic. They're looking only at that little bit. How much will it cost us to make one more donut? They're not thinking about the rent they pay for the building, for the ovens, the marketing staff, the chef who's on a salary gets paid whether he does anything or not. Even the staff who are there, working the counter, regardless of how many donuts they're being sold. All of those are fixed costs. Although, the people on the counter may be a variable cost. You may have to actually add more or take somebody away, but mostly these are fixed costs and they're ignoring them. Now, the assumptions that the orthodox model makes in saying that businesses will operate according to, a fixed price, where they ignore everything else. In terms of independence, market supply, it gives you consumer sovereignty. Firms produce what consumers want. Efficiency, you'll get efficiency, more output with a higher price. Efficiency, less output at a lower price. It's a wonderful thing. Perfect competitive equilibrium is wonderful. Output increases with higher prices along the supply curve. Perfectly competitive firms think they can profit at higher marginal costs. If demand increases, they'll make more. And they'll make it at a higher price because that's what will draw out more output, and the price will go up because costs have gone up to produce that more extra stuff. Less demand, they'll cut back. Giving people what they want. Businesses will make a profit. If they produce more than the equilibrium, they'll be losing money, but they'll be making a profit at the equilibrium price because they're not thinking straight. They're not thinking about all the other costs that go into this. If you're making too much profit, new entrants will come in and there'll be a new lower price. What happens to prices if workers become more productive? Marginal costs will shift out. You can make more at every, you can make more at any price, or you can produce the same amount at lower costs. What happens if firms lower fixed costs? Here's a trick question. This is a standard trick question on microeconomics exams. What happens if rent goes up? Nothing. In the orthodox model, nothing. Because these firms pay no attention to the anyhow cost, the cost they have to pay regardless of how much they produce or how little they produce. Excuse me. Perfectly competitive firms ignore the effect that they have on the market. They produce more, they don't pay any attention. They think that the market will just absorb any amount that they produce. They just focus on marginal cost. Okay. They act as if they face a flat demand curve where they can sell any amount at a constant price. Is that really what happens? No, it's not. If you are going door to door among your neighbors offering to shovel the driveways or mow the lawn or clean the pool or water the lawn or walk the dog, any of these activities, even if you charge the same price to everybody, when you're going further and further and further away, your marginal cost of providing the services is going up. And you're starting to run into, at the same time that your marginal costs are going up, to sell more, you're going to be running into other people providing the same services. How will you handle? You go in thinking you're going to charge $20 for each dog walk. But when you go further from your home, there are other people already offering dog walks. How are you going to get their business? You're going to have to lower your prices. So yeah, your marginal costs are going up since you have further travel, and to sell more, you're going to have to lower your prices. Now, when the people next door to you find out that you're charging only $15 for the people down at the other end of town, they'll be like, hey, Jerry, how come you're charging me $20 while you're charging $15 for a dog walk for them? So what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to give them a $15 charge also. So your marginal revenue curve to sell more, you're not going to get the $20 from everybody. You will not actually have a fixed flat demand curve. Your actual marginal revenue curve, showing how much money you're going to get by additional sales, is going to be downward sloping. So your downward sloping marginal revenue curve is going to run into an upward sloping marginal cost curve. Now, in the orthodox model, the marginal cost curve is a supply curve because it tells you how much you'll produce at any price, on the assumption that you don't have to think about selling, lowering prices to sell more. Are there any such firms? Maybe a wheat farmer, a small wheat farmer dealing in international markets, maybe a corn farmer in Illinois selling to giant companies. But even those, even they have a distinct product. Small oil drillers, possibly, but even those usually have some sort of relationship with ExxonMobil or one of the other giants. Someone selling zucchinis at a farmer's market? Well, you think so, yeah. But you know what? I have preferred vendors at the Amherst Farmers Market. People who I buy from, I know them, I have a relationship with them. So they're not perfect competitors either. All of these companies have names. Why do you give a name to a company that's a perfect competitor? It's irrelevant. All the donuts go into the market, get sold at the same price. You don't need a name. Companies spend a lot of time working on their names, protecting their brand. They don't want any bad product to get out there. They don't want to get a reputation for shoddy merchandise. They want to protect their brand name. Why? Perfect competitors don't need a name. They don't have a brand. Yeah, they just sell their stuff. Real firms have names because real firms have brands. Real firms, to sell more, like you or me walking neighbors' dogs, to sell more, I have to start lowering my prices. And just as well, because perfect competition cannot last. Perfect competitors ignore their sunk costs. They eventually go bankrupt. And here you get a tiny bit of algebra or arithmetic. Unit profit is the price above my average cost, not above marginal cost. Your average cost is the sum of your variable costs plus your fixed costs divided by output. Profit is price minus the average total cost, profit per unit. Total profit is quantity times this. So it's price times quantity minus sum of variable costs plus fixed costs. If you produce and price where marginal cost equals price, You may occasionally make a profit, but it's going to be accident because it will depend on your fixed cost being really low or price being unusually high. In practice, most businesses, very few businesses are like that. Most businesses, the variable costs are maybe half of value added. It varies, some businesses more, but a lot of businesses less. Okay, so compare marginal cost with average total cost. You may be in a situation where your price will be such that your marginal cost seems okay, but your average total costs are going to be higher. This breaks out some of the costs. Variable costs, raw materials, supplies, energy, fuel, production workers. Fixed costs, depreciation on your machinery, salaries of administrative staff, social charges. When I mentioned here, labor and supplies, a lot of labor is a fixed cost. Utility services, security, leases, a lot of fixed costs. Marginal costs rise as you increase output, fixed costs don't change. At very low levels of output, most of your costs are fixed costs because you're not spending very much on variable, but you still have to pay all the fixed stuff. Yeah. Stay in business, you've got to cover both. And the capitalist economy can only function if firms can cover both, which means it can only function if firms have some monopolistic power. They don't have to be the only producer of relevance, but to be sure, they're the only producer of the stuff that they make at the place where they make it and the name that they make it under. The Dunkin' on Route 9 in Amherst is the only donut shop at that location called Dunkin' Donuts. There are other donut shops, but that's the only Dunkin'. So it's not a monopoly. You can get another donut. You can get something else to eat. You can even get something else to eat that has fat and sugar. But you can't get another donut at that location except from Dunkin'. Virtually every real business is a monopoly in that sense. Not perfect, because virtually every real business faces something else. Comcast has a monopoly in Amherst of cable modem, but you could access the internet using your mobile data. Maybe you could even do dial-up over Verizon or something. I don't know. But there are, and you don't need internet to watch a movie. You could turn on a TV if you could find one. I think they still have over-the-air television. Or you could get, you could get a DVD. And there are other ways to get entertainment. You could read a book, for heaven's sakes. Oh my God, what an idea. And you could actually read a book on paper. Like I have some over there. See over there? There's a pile of books. Read all of them except the one at the top. I have a Kindle also, and I can read Kindle stuff on my phone, there are many ways to do things. So it's not clear that anybody has a perfect monopoly, but it's also not clear that anybody has no monopolistic power. Okay, average fixed costs may exceed marginal costs for a long time. If you ignore fixed costs, you'll lose money. You won't always lose money. I mean, you may be able to make money if you're in the upper part of the really high up on the marginal cost curve. But that's taking a chance. You generally won't. How would you price airline tickets? If you are thinking in perfect competitive world, you'll just price the ticket as price of feeding customers. International flights usually do have meals. The staff, the wait staff, flight attendants. You okay, Corduroy? Yeah, it was disgusting. Dogs are gross. Feeling better, Corduroy? Okay. How much extra fuel for one more passenger? I'm saying $50. I think that's really, an outside number. The average cost, might be about $330 for the flight. That's not taking account of the overhead staff, marketing, et cetera, for Air France or United or whatever. Maybe they charge $500. That's a bit on the cheap side, I think. But these are tough decisions. And in fact, if you're on this flight, we'll talk about this some more another time. There's almost no two people on that plane are going to be paying the same ticket price. They really do this dynamic pricing. Is it smart to price airline tickets without considering the cost of the plane? I mean, this Dreamliner goes $750 million a piece. I don't know, something outrageous. Okay, perfectly competitive firms, myopic and dumb. They ignore fixed costs. They ignore the effect that increasing output has on market price. These are the two real dumb things. And when you leave here and get a job running some Fortune 500 company, you won't make these mistakes. You'll know that you can increase output only by lowering prices. So you've got to take into account what actually happens to your revenue when you increase output. And you'll take account of fixed costs. You know that you got to lower prices. Every time you lower prices, you're giving a discount to those who would have paid more. If you sell 2 beers for $18, $36 total revenue, what do you do to sell the third beer? You lower the price to $16. So you're selling beer at $16, but how much extra revenue do you get? What's your marginal revenue? $12, because you gave a discount to the first two people. Then you think, okay, I'll make up for it on the next one. You lower your prices to $14. Now you can sell 4 beers. You think, okay, I'm doing great. $56 total revenue. So wait a second, you only got $8 in more revenue. You thought you were doing so well. By the time you get to 6 beers, you're getting $60 total revenue, which is only the same as you had on the 5 beers. You had to give so much in discount to the people who are already drinking that you're not actually getting any more revenue. You're just paying more because you're laying out more marginal cost. Your marginal revenue is a price minus the change in price to everybody else. So why is marginal revenue always less than the price? Because you're always having to give a discount to the people who are going to buy anyway. Isn't economics fun? I mean, isn't this a really cool idea, marginal revenue? Corduroy. Yeah, you're a good dog, but you'd be a good dog even if you stopped making gross sounds. Yeah, you want to say hello to people? No, he's wondering if he wants to throw up or do something gross. Okay, marginal revenue is always less than the selling price because you're always having to give discounts to everybody else. If you sell on the demand curve rather than the marginal revenue curve, you're going to be selling below at a marginal revenue that's less than the cost of producing a lot of this stuff. You're only getting a certain marginal revenue and you think you're getting all that, because you think you're getting all that higher price, you're going to be producing higher up your marginal cost curve than you should. And you're going to be losing money. You produce at the perfect competitive place, you're producing at a marginal cost way above your actual marginal revenue. Instead, a monopolist is smart. You will be smart. You will produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That's a lot less output than the perfect competitive place. Because there's less output, what can you do with price? Boost up price. Because it's less output, you're not producing where marginal revenue is less than your marginal cost. You're not producing all those units where your marginal cost is greater than your marginal revenue. Produce less, sell at a higher price, maybe make profit. I mean, you're not always going to make profit, but you at least have a much better chance. Now, smart businesses think this way. Microsoft, IBM, Apple, all these businesses, Dunkin' Donuts, Amazon, Starbucks, all these smart businesses, they know this. And what do? They have to try to limit competition. By limiting competition, they're able to insulate their market and raise prices, reduce output, raise prices, and survive. Only monopolies will survive. If you sell on the demand curve and price at marginal costs, you're going to lose money. Instead, form a monopoly. Think about your marginal revenue curve, produce less, raise prices, make profit, be a successful capitalist. Go for it. Okay, folks. Okay, we will stop there on this point. This is one of the more important lectures, not that we covered a whole lot of ground. Main point here is marginal revenue. It's one of the more important lectures because it's one of the more difficult concepts. When I took intermediate microeconomics, we didn't get this in intro. I had the same guy for intro as for intermediate. As you might imagine, I was a fairly good student. I had an A+ in intro macro, A+ in intro micro. I thought I was really great. I had A+ in a lot of my other classes. And I got to intermediate micro, wasn't paying very much attention. I had some other classes that I thought were more interesting. I thought I was too good for intermediate micro. And got the first exam. There's a lot of marginal revenue. I got a B. Professor didn't just give me a B. He gave me a B. He circled it in red. And he said, get with the program. There's a little bit more to the story. This guy went from Columbia to Williams, where he was the chair of the department. There was a guy I knew in high school, 2 years ahead of me, president of student council, president of the chess club. And he was that kind of guy. He went to Columbia ahead of me, which was pretty unusual. People from my high school mostly went to Cornell. They didn't go to Columbia, like my sister and my wife. Anyway, Mike Fortunato, I'll give his name, went to Columbia, ahead of me, had the same guy for microeconomics. He was a very inspiring instructor, actually. And then Mike went to Harvard. Ended up there 2 years ahead of me, maybe 3. He was significantly ahead of me. I took a year off, my 1 year of honest labor. Anyway, I was finishing up graduate school, applying for jobs, and Williams came to town to interview. I signed up for an interview. I thought Williams might be a nice place. By that point, I already had a job. I already had an offer from here, so I wasn't really interested in anything else. They only wanted to come here. But I thought, well, go talk. Who knows? Got there, chatted with Ralph. Ralph said, "Oh, Jerry, your Vita is great. You're amazing letters of recommendation, but I can't hire you." I said, "Why not?" I said, "Well, we hired Mike, and it didn't work out." Mike didn't like living in a small town, and it didn't work out. And I can't recommend another Columbia Harvard student. So whatever. Anyway, Mike ended up leaving Williams, leaving tenure track, but he continued to work there. And I have visited occasionally. Anyway, Mike probably did very well on this question in that exam, because he did his dissertation on imperfect competition with Richard Caves, and made a career, probably paid much better than academic life, as a business consultant. So learn about marginal revenue, understand imperfect competition and monopolies, how every business has some element of monopoly power, and you want to nurture that. And you too will be able to make more money than you would as a college professor. Okay, we'll pick up next time on all this stuff. Bye-bye.